just made the comment, how can that be confidential? And why would that be classified? I can see IAEA having those confidential agreements with normal powers. Iran is not a normal nation. Largest state sponsor of terror, and we rushed to the United Nations, had this deal approved, and we don't even understand how those samples are going to be collected and the chain of custody. It's unbelievable. Secretary Kerry, I've heard this deal described as historic. I won't use Vice President Biden's full terminology, but this is a big deal, correct? This is a big deal, right?
It's an important agreement.
During our, unfortunately, limited debate on the Iranian Nuclear Agreement Review Act, I offered a couple of amendments, tried to offer a third, but one was to deem this a treaty, because I think it's such a big deal it rises to that level where 2/3 of the Senate should affirmatively approve such a big, historic deal. That unfortunately, that amendment failed. I never got a vote on my next step in the process is let's deem this a congressional executive agreement where at least both chambers, you said both chambers ought to be involved, would have to affirmatively approve this with just a simple majority vote. The third amendment I tried to offer really reflected what we actually ended up getting in this very convoluted process of a vote of disapproval, which would have been a congressional executive agreement with a low threshold of approval of only 34 votes. Now, the parliamentarian, I think, very appropriately said, no, that's out of order. That's unconstitutional. And yet that's what we have. My question to you is, if you were so confident this is such a great deal, why wouldn't have you been supportive of allowing the American people to be involved in the decision through their elected representatives as to whether or not that was, by just allowing both chambers to have a simple vote of approval rather than this convoluted process, which, let's face it, you're quite confident you're going to win this. You've run to the United Nations Security Council. Convince me that what we're going through right now isn't just a big charade, because I'm afraid that's exactly what it is. But again, please tell me, why wasn't this administration, if you're so confident this is such a great deal, why didn't you allow this body, this Congress, the ability to at least affirmatively vote to approve this deal?
It wasn't my decision.
Well, the administration certainly did not offer any kind of support for a more robust review process, and you certainly circumvented this Congress by running and undermining our review process by having the Security Council approve this. Isn't that true?
Well, Senator, on the contrary, this is a long time honored process for several centuries of political agreements between countries.
This is way more than political agreement. I want to go on. Secretary Moniz, if Iran wants a peaceful nuclear program, there's no reason for them to have to enrich uranium, is there?
Well, I think clearly there is uranium available on the international market.
There you go.
But it's also the case that many countries support their nuclear program with enrichment. And
but again, if they want a purely peaceful program, there's no need for them to enrich uranium. In the past, when, for example, South Africa and Libya gave up their nuclear programs to be welcomed into the world of nations in a more normal fashion, like Iran supposedly wants, they completely gave up their enrichment. We dismantled that. That's what we demanded, correct?
I believe that's the case, certainly with South Africa. Their whole weapons program was, because they had a weapons program that was dismantled. So and if I may add, by the way, relative to the last discussion, the documents of the IAEA in South Africa in a full nuclear weapons dismantlement program remain confidential.
Are you familiar with the EMP Commission's 2008 report?
No, I'm not, sir.
You're not. Do you know what EMP is?
You'll have to explain it to me, please.
Electromagnetic pulse.
Oh, I'm sorry. Whose report, I'm sorry, is this?
The 2008 EMP Commission.
No, I'm not, sir. I'm just not. I apologize. I can respond for the record if you have a question there.
Okay, and I will send you a number of questions, because the recommendations really were for the Department of Homeland Security and for the Department of Energy. We just held a hearing. Are you familiar with Dr. Richard Garwin?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, he testified before our committee.
Everyone is.
Good. He testified before our committee yesterday in combination with the CIA former director James Woolsey about the threat of EMP. And one of the reasons I thought I'd hold that hearing is now with what I believe, disputable, nobody knows how this is all going to game out, but I think the inevitable conclusion of this deal is just like North Korea, eventually Iran will have a nuclear weapon, plus they already have ballistic missile technology. Are you aware of the fact that Iran has practiced ship-launched EMP attacks using Scud missiles?
No, I am not, sir. No.
They have done that according to Dr. Peter Vincent Pry. So an EMP attack, of course, would be conducted by somebody like North Korea or Iran, and it could be conducted from a ship off our coast using a Scud missile. And the fact that you, as the Secretary of the Department of Energy, are not even aware of the 15 recommendations, basic recommendations, things like evaluate and implement quick fixes in the event of an EMP attack. The fact that Richard Garwin, in front of our testimony, said that for literally $20 to $70 million, we could protect 700 critical transformers that could help us recover from something like that. I'm highly concerned.
Well, sir,
as you, Secretary of Energy, not even aware of these recommendations that were made public in 2008. 7 years later, in testimony for our committee, we have done nothing, virtually nothing, to address these 15 recommendations by the Commission.
Well, first of all, if I may say, and again, I don't know that report, and clearly many of them must apply to DHS and DOD. However, on the transformer question, actually, if you look at our quadrennial energy review published in April, we do identify EMP as a risk to transformers, and we are beginning to try to work up a response to that.
7 years later, we've done virtually nothing to protect ourselves. So again, in light of this deal, my point being, and we'll provide a number of questions on the record to make sure that we start taking action on that to provide some protection. My final comment is we've heard, $50 billion to $100 billion, $104 billion. I mean, in our terms, doesn't really seem like that much, but it's 13% of Iran's economy. If, for example, the American economy had an interjection of 13% of our economy, that'd be $2.4 trillion. So this isn't chump change, and we've already seen exactly what kind of actor Iran is on the world stage. So again, I can't predict this whole thing out, but what basically this deal does is interjects tens of billions, 13% up front of Iran's economy into the economy of the largest state sponsor of terrorism. And so when Senator Risch said, we have them right where we want them, I mean, I agree. We certainly didn't want them with centrifuges, but this deal puts them in a far better position. This strengthens their hands. And from that standpoint, I'm highly concerned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,